So a while back, I did a video on 10 haunted places in Savannah, Georgia. Problem is, there are tons of haunted places in Savannah, and most of them, including the ones I did in that video, could probably stand to have their own videos. But there was one place I purposefully didn't talk about in that video because I knew I wanted to do a full video on it. So here you go. This is the history of Bonaventure Cemetery. Bonaventure Cemetery actually lies just outside Savannah at 330 Bonaventure Road in the town of Thunderbolt. Every source I found used Savannah and Thunderbolt interchangeably, so I'm assuming it's either a suburb or it's just generally considered part of Savannah because it's so small that it is incorporated into it. Bonaventure was opened in 1846 as a private cemetery, and it was originally called Evergreen Cemetery. It was built on 70 acres of what was then the Bonaventure Plantation, which was owned by a man named John Mulrine. And it was established because other cemeteries in the area were quickly filling up. Interestingly, in the early days of the cemetery, many families liked to have picnics there as they visited the graves of their loved ones. The cemetery was bought by the city of Savannah in 1907, and I believe it was at this point that its name was changed to Bonaventure. Over the next century or so, it amassed a pretty rich history. Among those buried there are Johnny Mercer, a musician and co-founder of Capitol Records, and Conrad Aiken, a former poet laureate of the United States and Georgia. According to legend, Conrad Aiken had his grave fashioned as a bench so people would sit on it. I'm not sure why you would want anyone to sit on your grave, but to each their own. But interestingly, the cemetery's most famous resident is a 6-year-old girl named Gracie Watson. Gracie's father was a manager at the Pulaski House, which has been many things in its lifetime, but at the time was a hotel. Guests and staff at the hotel loved Gracie and were devastated when she died of pneumonia in 1889. An elaborate statue was carved over her grave, but we'll get to that more later on. There is one thing I want to address before I move on though. Gracie died in 1889, but the building now known as the Pulaski House wasn't built until 1914. I'm not sure if there was just another building there at the time of her death that is now called the Pulaski House, or if there's something else I missed that could explain this, but I thought I would point it out. Today, the Pulaski House serves as a residence hall for students at the Savannah College of Art and Design, which I considered going to at one point, but never actually applied. In 1992, the Bonaventure Historical Society was founded. Their mission, according to their website, has always been the preservation and conservation of Savannah's historic Bonaventure Cemetery. However, just 2 years later, they would have their work cut out for them when a book thrust the cemetery and the entire city of Savannah into the national spotlight. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, a Savannah story, was originally published in 1994. The cover depicts the now famous statue of the girl who is known as Bird Girl because she's supposedly holding out food for imaginary birds. Some people believe she was put on the cover because her 2 hands being held out represent good and evil. The book is nonfiction and most places list it as true crime. However, it mostly details author John Barrett's years visiting Savannah and eventually moving there after spending most of his adult life in New York. During his time in Savannah, he encounters people who can only be described as colorful. The actual crime part of the book doesn't start until about halfway through, when one of John Barrett's Savannah friends, a man named Jim Williams, was accused of killing his secret lover, a man named Danny Hansford. Williams claimed the killing was done in self-defense, but was put on trial for murder. He was ultimately tried 4 separate times for Danny's death. He was the first person in Savannah's history to be tried this many times for murder. But I will let you read the book for yourself to figure out how that all plays out. And as it turns out, the true part of true crime might not be entirely accurate here either. An author's note in the back of the book confirms that Barrett took certain storytelling liberties, and he also says, "Where the narrative strays from nonfiction, my intention has been to remain faithful to the characters and to the essential drift of events as they really happened." Midnight was a huge success, and like I said earlier, it thrust Savannah into the national spotlight. Tourism in the city was boosted by 50% after the book was published. Even though Bonaventure Cemetery was only mentioned a few times in the book, it too was thrust into the spotlight. A movie adaptation of the book was released in 1997, and parts of it were shot in Savannah and in Bonaventure Cemetery. But despite the attention their town was getting, many Savannah residents weren't too happy. They often referred to Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil as simply the book, and referred to the events in the story as true-ish. Terry Shaw, the then chairman of the Bonaventure Historical Society, I'm not sure if he still is, said of the book, "Dirty linens it is, and it brings, well, a certain low-class tourist to Bonaventure." I don't want to give too much away about the book or take personal digs at the author, but I can kind of understand where these people are coming from. Many of the portrayals of people in the book, whether real or fictionalized, don't exactly paint Southerners in the best light. And a lot of the attention Bonaventure Cemetery got as a result of the publicity wasn't too good either. In one incident, someone backed up, I think, a truck into a sundial in the cemetery and then just took the sundial. After that incident, the famous Bird Girl statue was removed from the cemetery by its owner, Einar Trosdal, who said that this was done because we were just afraid something could have happened to it. Today, the statue is housed at the Telfair Academy in Savannah. But of course, if you want to read the book or watch the movie for yourself and make up your own mind, purchase links as always will be down below. And then, of course, there are the hauntings. Despite Bonaventure being not too well known before 1994, I'm pretty sure the legends and hauntings go back even further. Among the alleged goings-on are statues that move on their own, making facial expressions at visitors. This is particularly common among the angel statues, but one particularly well-known moving statue is that of a woman named Corinne Lawton, whose sculpture is carved over her grave. Her statue is said to be facing away from the rest of her family's burial plot because her family was ashamed that she took her own life. Corinne is said to smile at pleasant people, but scowl at people who scowl at her statue. To be fair though, that statue looks pretty creepy. I can see why someone might scowl at it. Two more otherworldly creatures said to inhabit the cemetery are ones that most living people find adorable: babies and dogs. Visitors have reported a baby's crying near an actual infant's grave in the cemetery. Though to be fair, this could just be an actual baby crying, and the fact that it's near a baby grave could just be a morbid coincidence. Others have claimed to feel breath on their heels or hear angry barking in the distance. This is said to be the hellhounds that inhabit the grounds, though again, to be fair, it could just be real dogs and or the wind. Another legend tells the story of a dinner party that took place on the grounds back when it was still Bonaventure Plantation. Dinner parties in that day were business as usual at the plantation, but this one took a dark turn. A servant approached the master of the house and told him that a fire had broken out. The master gathered up the rest of his servants and told them to move all of the tables, chairs, and food outside so his guests could continue enjoying the party. And they did. The guests continued to eat, drink, and party outside as the house burned down in front of them. At the end of the party, I presume when the house was completely burned down, the master raised a toast, and he and his guests threw their glasses against a tree trunk. The fire didn't seem to have any human casualties, but people say in the cemetery you can still hear a fire crackling and the sound of laughter. This story was recounted in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, but I can't find any other sources to confirm it actually happened. But the cemetery's most famous ghost is the aforementioned Gracie Watson. The ghost of Gracie herself is said to be seen playing in the cemetery from time to time, but most of these stories around her grave center on the statue. Visitors like to leave toys on the statue, and she is said to cry tears of blood if the toys are taken away. People also leave coins at the grave, and supposedly if you put a coin in her hand and run around her statue 3 times, the coin will disappear. Frankly though, I'm not sure why you want your coins to just vanish like that. What if you want a gumball later? Maybe these people are tourists who say Gracie took their money because they actually spent it on some gimmicky t-shirt at a gift shop and ended up regretting it and didn't want to admit it. At some point after Gracie's death, a fence was built around her grave. I couldn't find a reliable source to confirm exactly why the fence was put in place. Some people said it was because others rubbed the statue for good luck and it eventually wore down, so a fence was put around the grave to stop people from doing that. Others suggest that the fence was actually built to keep Gracie's spirit in. Although, to be fair, if she is still wandering the earth as a ghost, she seems like a pretty benign one. Of course, if you want to experience Bonaventure yourself, you can. It's open 365 days a year from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are several different companies that give tours of the now over 100 acres of ground that make up the cemetery. I'll leave links to some of them below if you want to check them out. And if you don't want to go all the way to Savannah, there's actually a tour app you can get. Unfortunately, the reviews are mixed at best, but if you want to spend the $5 and see for yourself, I will leave those links below as well. It's available both on iOS and Google Play. Believe it or not, you can also get married at the cemetery. Not exactly the place you'd expect, but kind of a strangely appealing idea. I kind of want to get married at Bonaventure now. I just have to find someone to, marry me. So that's just about all I have for you today on Bonaventure Cemetery, and of course I would love to know your thoughts. Do you think Bonaventure Cemetery is really haunted? Have you ever been there, and have you ever had a paranormal experience? And do you think the publication of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil helped it or hurt it more? Let me know in the comments. Like I mentioned in my earlier video about Haunted Savannah, I would love to go there someday, but I actually passed up an opportunity last year. Hopefully one day I'll get another one. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and share it. And for more dark content, I hope that you will consider subscribing and hitting that bell. Thank you so much for watching and have a creepy day. Bye guys.